But thank you very much. Thank you
Um,
very much for joining us.
Dr. Mark, good morning.
We are very excited to have you, mate. And I can see you. This is great. We're on Zoom, which is awesome. So
Yep.
away we go. Now, look, we've got to start with, hang on, what number book are we
Let
up
me
to?
just check the audio that I do
Eh,
have what I think.
Can you hear me
Yes,
okay?
yeah, and can you
Yep.
hear that blowing?
Oh, I got
Okay, so
that.
yeah, okay, I'm using the proper microphone. Got my glass of lemon juice and honey because I've got a bit of a wog. Okay, ready to rock, Dr. Mark. Take it away.
Dr. Carl, now I never know where to start with you, Dr. Carl, because I know I could sit here and talk to you for days and days and days, and I know you're an incredibly busy man. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. I think we've got to get the latest book out of the way. What number book are we at?
That's number 47.
Okay.
And it's called Dr. Carl's Little Book of Climate Change Science. And it's basically optimistic because it says that we can stop and reverse global warming and bring conditions and carbon dioxide levels back to what they were in the 20th century with today's technology. And we can do it very cheaply. You see, at the moment, it depends on two numbers, 8 and 2. 8 is 8% of the world's GDP,
Right.
which is what is given for free as a present, as a subsidy to the fossil fuel companies.
Ooh.
8%, $5.9 trillion.
Yeah.
Australia's GDP is only 1.5, right? And the 2 is the 2% that we need to reverse global warming. And then the 6% of money we got left over that we don't have to give to the fossil fuel companies anymore, they'll cry, of course. We can spend on health, education, welfare, teddy bears, childcare, picnics, good stuff.
That's just good stuff. That is good stuff. Now, look, as soon as you start this conversation with pretty much anyone, Dr. Carl, the science goes out the window and it's all about what we can afford, what political party's done the right and wrong thing, and whether or not just plain old solar power can save us. So is it just simply a case of us all getting solar power on our roofs, getting a decent battery system, and then running around and buying a solar powered car and maybe running our solar powered energy from our roof to recharge our car? Will that be, will that be a solution to most of the problem?
It'd be a small step. The way to think about it is to go back to the 7th of December, 1941, when Pearl Harbor got bombed.
Right.
The Americans went ape. They immediately shut down their car factories and said, the cars that you're making now, boot them through, and then retool to make tanks, artillery pieces, aeroplanes, weapons of war. And so in the previous half century, the Americans had made 3,000 aeroplanes. In the next 4 years, they made not 3,000, 300,000.
Wow.
That's a sort of coordinated government worldwide activity we need. Like we need to do this at a high level and cover all aspects of climate change. And the advantage of doing it is that it'll provide massive employment. The health of the world will go up in terms of air pollution. Like, did you know that in 2018, of the 45 million people who died from various reasons in 2018, 1/5 died from dirty air from breathing fossil fuel exudate? So
And I
the
guess
world would be a better place.
that's the numbers we don't hear enough, isn't it?
No. So the thing is that it's like big tobacco in the past and big alcohol, and now you got big fossil fuel. Well, they have got the right to pollute for free. If you want to do any renovations in your place, you can't just simply get the timber offcuts and throw them into the neighbour's place.
Yeah.
Nobody, only the fossil fuel company has the right to pollute for free via plastics, which they make, and via greenhouse gases. So we need government level. And the solutions that you've suggested are a big part of getting there, but we need it covering all areas, say concrete and steel. Between them, they're 2.5, between them, they're 15% of global emissions. Agriculture varies around the world, but we can pretty well get, if we tried hard, with the same effort the Americans had at World War II, we could get our emissions down to 5% of what they are today within 10 years.
Wow.
But we'd have to work hard at it. But the thing is, there'd be more employment and there'd be people working like crazy. There'd be jobs everywhere and the air would get cleaner.
So
And it'd actually be cheaper because we're already giving 8% of all the money earned on the planet by all the governments for free as a present to the fossil fuel companies. We're giving it to them.
and I've never understood that, because if fossil fuel is, as important as it is, surely it should be running at a profit. Why do they need subsidies? If it's a
They
true
do
free
run at a
base,
profit.
Yeah,
But
but that's
this
what I'm
is on
saying.
top
So
of that.
why get the subsidies in the first place? If it's a true free market that we're supposed to live in, why give them any money?
Because they've been influencing the politicians. So here's a bit of the history. So it turns out that in the 1970s and 80s, the best research on climate science was done by the fossil fuel companies. And in fact, in 1973, Munich Re, the world's largest reinsurance company, started increasing premiums because of what they called global warming back then, causing extreme weather events. That was
Right.
1973. Now, Munich Re was the world's, or is the world's, one of the world's largest reinsurance companies. So it's not like you and me, we go to an insurance company and say, can you insure my car against hail damage or my house against hail damage? Because when you do that with your local insurer, they then go to a reinsurer like Munich Re
Right.
and say, look, we've got 400,000 policies for hail damage. Can we take out insurance policy? And they spread the risk across the whole planet. In fact, the insurance companies realized that tobacco was bad for your health before the medical doctors put out official statements on it. So
Gee.
it's nothing personal, it's just money. And so they were recognizing it in 1973. By 1982, the fossil fuel companies, and we have the photographs, had a meeting where they showed projections for the future, and they predicted that from 1982 to 2020, that the temperature would rise by 1 centigrade degree and that the carbon dioxide levels would go up to about 415, and they were very, very close if we did business as usual. And in the 70s and 80s, they were saying, we've got to do something about this. And then around 1990, they had a big change of heart and they started denying climate change at the rate of up to $1 billion a year of denial.
So
And it's quite clear.
you mentioned denial to me when we were organising this chat, that it's actually very easy to deny. You know, you could have a big pile of pages of science on one hand, and on the other hand, one page that says no way. It's easier to deny something than accept it, right?
Yeah, like I can say the following sentence, which is totally inaccurate, in about 10 seconds. Here we go. There's no such thing as global warming, and the climate has always changed anyway. And if it did get warmer, well, it'd be good for us because you'd have to wear one less jumper in winter. Now, that took me about 10 seconds. To
Yeah.
deny that, to go through the whole thing would take about, say, 15 minutes. So that's what we call in a trade a bull dust asymmetry factor of about 100 to 1. So what I can, the number of lies I can say in 10 seconds will take me 100, no, it'll take me 1,000 seconds, the best part of a third of an hour to deny.
Wow.
So that's the technique used, the garbage gallop. And in fact, the fossil fuel companies, even in the mid 1980s, they decided to not develop the world's biggest natural gas site because while it was 30% carbon, while it was 30% methane, this is in the South China Sea, Natuna, Natuna, look it up on Wikipedia. They decided to not develop it because it also contains 70% of carbon dioxide and would have increased the world's emissions by 1% just by itself and would have been the largest single point emitter. And then they changed. And you're saying, but look, I know that big tobacco would lie to me, but big alcohol wouldn't lie. Now, here's an example of big alcohol lying.
Yeah.
In August, in 2018, in every hospital in Australia appeared a huge A0 poster saying it has not been proven. There was a picture of a pregnant woman standing sideways without a head, boo the patriarchy, yeah. And it said it has not been proven that alcohol is dangerous to the unborn baby of a pregnant woman. Now, that is a lie.
Yeah.
And we've known it for a third of a century at least. It has been proven that alcohol is dangerous to the unborn baby of a pregnant woman. Now, big alcohol, this is Australia, 2018, every hospital. Big alcohol was not specifically trying to increase the number of babies born with fetal alcohol syndrome and therefore a chance of being mentally retarded and physically deformed.
Yeah.
That was not their goal. Their goal was just to sell more alcohol. And there were these women who were pregnant who were refusing to drink it. And they just wanted to increase the numbers. Nothing personal, it was just business. The mentally deformed, mentally retarded babies, that was just collateral damage. So that was big alcohol as recently as 2018.
Wow.
Right? So telling lies, right? Okay. And so big fossil fuel is still telling lies today. But if you read the book Climate War by Michael Mann, points out their techniques and how we can reverse it.
Right. Okay. Sounds like we've
We
got a
can reverse it.
lot
The
of
good
work
news
to
is,
do, Dr. Carl. Um,
yeah,
Now, while you're here, I sent out an email. People were heard that I was going to chat to you today, but I've just my email's playing up here in the studio, so I'm going to play you a bit of audio here. This is from
lovely.
Dr. Beck. I hope it comes through. I'll relay it to you if it doesn't work. So let's just give this a try.
Let's give it a go, man.
Carl, this is Dr. Beck. Oh, that sounds good, Dr. Beck. Mum and Dad, I made it. I'm a doctor. Anyway, I was just wondering, is there a possibility for, obviously we have all these issues with landfill, there's a problem around the world with just too much plastic. Can we recycle plastic and build houses out of it? Because we obviously have an issue with materials for building houses. Thank you. Dr. Beck out.
Ah, Dr. Beck, you are so insightful at seeing where to apply your intellectual energy. Yes, we can recycle plastics. We can make energy out of it. However, the fossil fuel companies are the major suppliers of plastics. And they
Yeah.
don't want to recycle plastic because what they want you to do is buy more new plastic. What they think you should do with the old plastic, chuck it in the ocean, chuck it in landfill. And so we've got the situation where we're finding it in the deepest parts of the oceans and in the human body. We're now finding microplastics inside the human body because they've entered the food chain, and we can stop and reverse this. So firstly, only about 5% of plastics are recycled. You look at those numbers on the bottom of your plastic recycling thing, and then there's a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then a little triangle made up of arrows. That says what sort of plastic it is, but it doesn't mean that it's going to get recycled. Only about 5% of all plastics get recycled, and that is in the interests of big fossil fuel, who are turning out to be kind of naughty in this regard.
Yeah.
So what would we do instead of plastics? Well, firstly, whatever we've got, we'll start recycling them because it's good for our children and the environment for the future. But secondly, we can do much of what we do with plastics. And let me tell you, I love a good plastic that can do something that we can't do with something else. Like I've done a lot of four-wheel driving through the Australian outback. I've covered 15 of the 17 deserts. And for all that time, it was a steel winch cable. But now you can get Kevlar. Oh my God, it's stronger weight for weight and volume for volume. And steel cable is fragile. If you get a kink, like a sudden bend, in a steel cable and put a weight on it, it can break at that bend. And I have read in the medical literature of cases of the steel winch cable cutting through a human like a knife through hot butter.
Oh God. Okay.
Which is why whenever you're towing, whenever you do anything with a steel cable, you got to tie a blanket to it to give it some wind resistance in case it breaks down. That's the whole purpose of it. So as an example of what we can do without fossil fuel bases, we humans have already made wood transparent.
Yeah.
And separately, we have made wood harder than steel.
Gee.
You can make a knife out of it. So all we need to do is put the money into the sciences. And by the way, when you put the money into subsidies into fossil fuel, it just vanishes into their pockets and it stays in the company balance. And so when the head of Exxon retired, he took with him $400 million.
Oh my God. Exxon.
Now,
how much mess did they make in 1 year?
Okay, so as an example, I meet all sorts of people, and I've run into some wealthy people, bankers in New York, and they've told me that all you need to be infinitely wealthy is 100 million.
Yeah.
There you are. It makes it life easier for you, mate. So all you need is 100 million, and the interest of that means that you can buy a first-class flight around the world each week.
Wow.
And stay at the best hotels. 100 million is all you need. So why are we giving them 400 million? It is such a waste of money. We shouldn't be giving them anything at all. Now, it is very naughty what we're doing. So Beck, we can go, but on the other hand, if you give money to the scientists, does it vanish into their $5 million house?
No.
No, the scientists get paid the same as tradies. And what they do is they then pay rent or they try to buy a house. Good luck in Australia at the moment. And then they buy milk and bread and they put it into the economy and it goes around and around. So if you put money into scientific research or into the trades, it doesn't get wasted. It goes around and around. But you give it as a subsidy to big fossil fuel, mate, you're never seeing that money again.
This is true. Now, the other thing too that I find frustrating is, as I say to myself, okay, I want to eat healthy, so I'll go down to the shop and I'll buy some nice baby spinach, right? Because, Popeye ate spinach and, he's big and muscly, so therefore I should eat spinach. But of course, it's in one of those crunchy plastic bags, and aren't they the hardest to even break down? Aren't they the worst of the worst? Those really crunchy, clear plastic bags.
I don't know which ones are the worst, but the thing is that you shouldn't be using single-use plastics when you can use something else. And what you do with that single-use plastic is you use it just once and you put it into plastic recycling. But the ABC did, via their various good programs, they put trackers on these recycling trucks, and the recycling trucks, in some cases, just dumped it in general landfill. We need better work at a high level, like at a government level. So when Pearl Harbor got bombed, the American government didn't say, okay, everybody stop buying sushi. No, mate. They just went in boots and all. So we can fix this problem, but it needs the individuals to have politicians who are concerned more about the long-term benefit of the country rather than their own personal betterment. And when I hear the phrase professional politician, that can go both ways. I tried running for politics on a climate change ticket. I failed, but I learned a lot about politics. It was great. It was a very good but expensive education.
Okay. All right. Now, Dr. Carl, I've got another question here. Dr. Ebony has got together with her kids. So this is from a youngster. I'm not sure which way this is going to go. This is Dr. Quinn.
Carl, my name is Quinn. My question for you is, Mum tells me I sleepwalk and sleep talk. If that's true, why can't I remember?
Oh, good question.
Okay. So firstly, sleeping is a different state of existence from being awake. And it's almost like there's a different person running your body because you're doing important and different things. And by the way, you will grow from being shorter to being an adult, and you'll do that by a hormone called growth hormone, which is mostly released when you're asleep. So sleep is very important for you. Sleepwalking is more common in kids, and they tend to get out of it. In most cases, in fact, it is not a bad thing to wake up people when they're sleepwalking. It won't kill them or anything, but you may as well just sort of gently guide them to the bed. What you want is that they don't do weird things. And most sleepwalkers don't do weird things, but sometimes I'll do weird things like start up the lawnmower and start mowing the lawn at 2 o'clock in the morning. Or there was a case of I think a 12-year-old kid who got partially dressed and then took a bus and a train and a bus, and by sunrise had traveled 700 kilometers. So the main thing is you don't want them to trip and fall and hurt themselves, and they will grow out of it. Why can't you remember? Okay, this is another thing. This is an important thing for you. Firstly, there is so much coming into your brain. There's the shadow of the sun changing through the day. There's the wind, there's background noise, and you're trying to pay attention to somebody who's talking to you, have a cup of tea with them. There's all sorts of things going on. So the first thing your brain does is simply throw away a lot of stuff. And then secondly, what it does is it comes up with a few programs or algorithms where it can process incoming information based on your past experiences. And that's why visual illusions are so easy, because you don't see what's really there. You see what your past experience expects you to be there. And so it might look like a vase, or it might look like two faces looking at each other. So why can't you remember? For part of the reason is that in sleep, you actually process your memories and you throw some of them away.
I see.
And so just do this when you're talking with your friends. So just sort of run through what you did each day. And every now and then, about maybe every 10th day, you'll say, oh, and then we did this. And if you're not scared of public exposure, just say, I don't remember that at all. And they'll say, yes, Quinn, you did that. And you say, I've got no memory of it. And you're being honest. You're not trying to fit in and not be weird. And as you do this, being totally honest with your friends, you'll find that each of you have forgotten something. And that was because while you were asleep, your brain said, mate, there's only a finite amount of room in this skull. There's infinite information coming in. I'm just going to dump it. So you don't remember so much simply because your brain is trying to protect you from this big, crazy, confused universe.
All right. Now, another one from, well, this is Dr. Quinn's sister, Dr. Eden. This is what she's
Dr.
got
Eden.
to ask. Hang on.
Hi,
Here we
Dr.
go.
Carl. My name is Eden. My question for you is, why can't I ever find the end of the rainbow?
Here's the thing. Firstly, everybody gets their own special rainbow.
Oh,
So if you are standing next to Quinn, you're seeing a different rainbow. So let's run through how it works. So imagine that there's been a big storm coming through and has come and gone, but it's still in front of you. The sun is behind you. So you have your back to the sun. And in front, there's a shadow. You've got a shadow. But in front of you, there's a big black sky. You want a black sky because that means it's easier for the rainbow to be seen. But also, because there's been a storm, there's little water droplets in the air. The sunlight is throwing a shadow over you, and you've got a shadow straight in front of you. And off to the, say, the left, at 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, there's all these little droplets in the air. And at 41 degrees, there's your special water droplet.
Right.
And the rainbow, the light from the sun goes into that water droplet, bends as it goes through the boundary, hits the back wall, reflects, comes out through the front wall, bends again, and lands in your eyeball. And at 41 degrees, you see a flash of red off to the left. By the way, at 39 degrees, you see a blue. So it goes from red to blue. And then because then that happens for raindrops that are slightly above you and above you and above you all the way over to the right. So that's why it's a hemicircle. And if you're on a tall, skinny building, you can see an almost complete circle of a rainbow. I've seen photos of that as well. Whereas your family member right next to you, they're looking at a raindrop that's maybe 20 centimeters different. So no matter how you keep on walking, if you start walking forward, you're going to be looking, if you walk forward 1 meter, you're going to be looking at the light coming from a raindrop 1 meter further forward. So it keeps on retreating from you forever. Look, don't worry, adult life is better than this, but rainbows are fun.
Yeah, rainbows are fun. Yes, absolutely. Dr. Eden, thank you very much for that question. Now we're going to go over to Dr. Beck in promotions. Now, she said she's asking, what is it about yawns that makes it so contagious? She's always wondered that. There is something about yawns. That's a real thing, right? If I yawn, it's only a matter of time before someone near me yawns, okay?
Yes. So firstly, let me introduce you to the word pandiculation, Pandiculation, which is a good crossword clue.
Yeah.
You'll use it one day. And it refers to the act of yawning and simultaneously, while you are yawning, moving one or the other arm and doing a big stretch. And back in the 1920s, an English doctor who was a neurologist had some patients who had had strokes. And he'd say, well, it looks like your right arm's paralyzed. Can you move your right arm? No. Go and have a go. Couldn't do it. And then they'd suddenly yawn and they could move their right arm. And so there is a separate yawn center in the brain. And the purpose of me telling you that story was to use the word yawn as often as possible to see if you've got a slight hint of feeling like you want to yawn a bit. So if you can catch a yawn either by listening to somebody say the word or by seeing somebody yawn, you have two characteristics, which is that you're kind and compassionate and you're not shy about showing it.
Okay.
So you can be kind, but if you're really shy, you're less likely to catch a yawn. If you're a bit schizophrenic or psychopathic, you have much more difficulty in catching a yawn.
Oh, well, I see. That didn't work on me. So I got some worries now because you mentioned yawning now and I haven't felt like yawning the whole time. So clearly I'm psychopathic. Is that what you're
It could
saying?
be just me. Now, do other people, no, only 1% of the population is psychopathic.
Okay.
And where you end up depends on a 2x2 grid of whether you are violent or not violent,
Right.
and whether you're intelligent or not intelligent.
Right.
So if you're violent and intelligent, you'll end up in the cops or the military. And if you're non-violent and intelligent and psychopathic, you'll end up running a hospital, a radio station, a TV network, a newspaper, a shop, whatever. And also
What about a really average breakfast show? Will that do?
a really excellent breakfast show. And also yawning is a sign that you are recovering from a sudden illness. And I was taught this in medical school, and I was on a plane halfway between Adelaide and Perth, and this big guy had a heart attack and there wasn't much I could do about it, and I was freaking, and suddenly yawned and I knew that things would get better. And we think that yawning is people bonding together as a group. So you and I are out guarding the tribe between 9 and midnight, and then I yawn and you yawn, and we both recognize that we're part of the same group, so we accept each other. We think it's some sort of group bonding behavior.
Wow. Okay. That is really.
And it's not due to low oxygen. Robert Provine, Provine, who was the world expert on yawning, fed university students not just 20% oxygen, like we normally breathe, but 100% oxygen, and they still yawned if they were given a really boring lecture.
Okay.
And also you can yawn when you're ready for something big. So if you look at the athletes about to go on to the football field or to do the 100-meter race, or a musician doing a solo performance on stage, just before they go on, you often see them yawn. So it's not just the sign of being tired, it's a complex thing.
Yeah, right. Oh, gee, I didn't realize the yawn was so complex. That is great.
No, I got that from the Big Lebowski. Everything is complex.
Right. Okay. Big lips. Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, we're going over to Dr. Chrissy now. Look, the inevitable COVID question. She's obviously, Dr. Norman Swan is your man for COVID, right? ABC's Dr. Norman Swan. He's brilliant with any COVID advice, and his podcast is awesome as well. But she's asking, how long after you've had COVID can you get the booster, and can you get COVID twice?
Yeah. Firstly, the record at the moment for getting COVID twice is 10 days.
Wow.
So
Really?
somebody got Delta, and while they were recovering from it, they got Omicron.
Yeah, because it's about the strain, isn't it? You can get
Yeah,
different
and
strains.
how long after you've had it can you have a booster? I don't know. I would check with your GP, but I'm going to give you some good news. And it starts like this. It turns out that the most popular vaccine given on Earth, on our entire planet, is to fight coronavirus, and it's been given for half a century. And you're thinking, hang on, COVID's only been around for a couple of years. And every year it saves tens of billions of lives. And you're saying there's only 8 billion people on the planet. And what I'm talking about is chickens. You see,
Right.
humans and chickens have long been infected by coronaviruses. And back in 1937, a coronavirus in chickens mutated to start killing them. It could infect 100% of a flock within 24 hours, and chicken numbers around the world just dropped mightily. And I remember when I was a kid, if I wanted a chicken, you'd have to go with your mother to my mother would take me to the butcher shop, and she'd ask the butcher, "Can you get us a chicken for Sunday dinner?" And the butcher would say, "Oh, I know this person who's got a chicken farm. Let me give them a ring." And they ring them and say, "Oh yeah, look, come back tomorrow. We'll get you one by Friday. Come back on Friday, right?" So there's no way you could walk into a supermarket, because anytime you had a group of chickens together, the coronavirus would kill them. They came up with a vaccine, and the situation today is that we have about 400 coronaviruses, each as lethal as the original one or more. And secondly, we've got about 100 different vaccines, which we use all over the planet. And the only reason that you can have a chicken palmy, a chicken schnitty, chicken soup, baked chicken, or fried chicken is because virtually every commercial chicken is vaccinated on the day that it hatches and every 2 weeks of their whole life.
Wow.
If they didn't, they'd be dead. And they're vaccinated by spraying it through the air or putting it in their drinking water.
Okay.
And so for what that means for us humans is that you'll go to the GP and they'll read your DNA to see what your strengths and weaknesses are. So it turns out, surprisingly, that some types of asthma give you protection against COVID, because you make a chemical called an immune system chemical called interleukin, and not just interleukin 17, like 16 or 18 is not going to do it. It's got to be interleukin 17.
Okay.
So they'll go and read your DNA and work out where you're going to be in the next 6 months, and then using a 3D printer in the doctor's surgery, print out a bunch of vaccines that'll protect you for the next 6 months. And so the coronaviruses will keep going around the planet, and then we humans will get vaccinated every 6 months, and they won't bother us, just like it doesn't bother the chickens.
Wow. Okay. All right.
That's where
There's
we're
the
heading.
future. There's the future. All right. Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Carl, I've got a little glitch here. I've just realized on the Zoom meeting, it's going to hit 40 minutes and it's telling me to upgrade. So can I just refresh this menu? So what I'll do is I'll call you back in about 1 minute. Dr. Carl is back with us. So obviously, Dr. Carl, throughout this, as I put this to her, I'll be mentioning your book every 10 minutes or so. So you'll get lots of love there. Let me just bring up Silly Outlook. Hey, Dr. Carl, I mean, look, I know this is not probably completely your domain, but sure, why is it computers freeze? Like you'll be going along and it's behaving fine, and you'll go to click on your email, and all of a sudden your email just stops and stares at you and doesn't do anything. The square comes up and we're done. We're dusted. It's not coming to work today. Why?
Bad programming. So I wrote my first computer program in 1964. Were you alive then?
No, I was not. That was previous to my existence.
Yeah, so I was using punched cards. And you have to put the program into a compiler. And if you had made any single error in how you'd set it up, the compiler would just crash and you have to find your error. And that was quite different from a logical error.
Right.
Like instead of saying, add this to that and then put the answer over there. And with the programs we've got now, they are what we call bloatware, and they've got so many features. Like a word processing program doesn't just process words. It'll also let you do layout, which used to be a whole different program. And rather than get rid of anything bad from the past, they just keep on adding new stuff into it. And so I remember my best version of Microsoft Word was Microsoft Word 5.1, which was about a quarter of a meg in size. And that's all it did. It just processed words.
Right.
And email programs just processed emails. But they didn't also tie into your calendar and every other thing.
Sure.
And so what we've got is bloatware with lots of bugs in it. Now, here's the second thing. In maybe 10 years ago, the big software manufacturers say, oh, look, we've found a few mistakes in our email program and our word processing program, and here's an update. Now, they don't tell you. There's just mistakes in it. And so what you do is, to find out at your end, is you should check with your IT officer. And your IT officer will say, oh, you've been using this program. Mate, everybody has problems with that. It's just stuffed. And they said, well, why don't they tell us that we've got problems with it? And they said, no, they'll just release another upgrade, which will still keep the old bad stuff in there. So why does your program crash? Because they're not spending enough time making simple programs that just simply do the job they're supposed to. And they're trying to be all things to all people.
See.
And hey, you're just the customer and they've got the monopoly on what they're selling. You got no choice.
So they're building on top of something that isn't been built that well in the first place, but at the same time, they're asking that to be more complex and do more things.
They're throwing in far more features. Like in my case, if I'm happy not to be automatically linked to a calendar. If I get an email saying, do you want to have a meeting at such and such a time? I'm very happy to just simply cut and paste, and a whole 60 seconds later, I've done it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just click, apparently it's done and it's there most of the time. Mostly.
That's it.
Not always.
And there's different calendars. Like Outlook's got one and Apple's got one. And so they don't all talk to each other, which which kills me, which, often you miss out on things. So I've got Jude here. Jude from sales has emailed us, and she's a very curious doctor. She's got a couple of questions. So we'll start with this one. Pins and needles, what causes that feeling?
Pins and needles. Let me introduce you to 3 words you've probably never heard before. Saturday night palsy.
Oh,
Palsy is a medical word meaning loss of function.
okay.
So what happens is that somebody will go out and get really drunk. I mean, really, really drunk on a Saturday night.
Okay.
I'll come back home and I'll start watching TV. And they're sort of relaxing. And then I'll put their arm over the back of the lounge. The inside of their arm will be resting on the back of the lounge. And there's a nerve there. I think it's the radial nerve. And it'll begin to squash after a while, and then they'll fall asleep. Now, normally, when you squash a nerve, you get these symptoms of pins and needles, and the nerve is saying to your brain, hey, Mark, look, you're going to cause some damage here in a while. Move your arm. And normally you will. And that's the pins and needles. It's a warning that your nerve is being squashed or has been damaged, like, hitting your nerve here just on the elbow. But in the case of Saturday night palsy, they've had so much alcohol that they're effectively anesthetized.
Uh-oh.
They stay like that for maybe 8 hours. They wake up in the morning and their arm is paralyzed.
Ah.
And sometimes it comes back, but sometimes it doesn't.
Saturday night palsy.
Saturday night palsy, look it up. So the pins and needles is your nerve warning your brain that the nerve is being squashed and you should do something about it, or it already has been squashed. So just take it gentle for a while until you come back to full recovery.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of false signals going into your brain.
All right. Dr. Jude is still on deck there. She's asking, is it true trees feed each other?
Yes, we used to have a primitive way of thinking of everybody's out for themselves and the trees would fight each other. Now, they don't actually have legs, but you can see them growing And you see these movies in time lapse of the trees growing, robbing each other of light. But about 8 years ago, we discovered something called, wait for it, the Wood Wide Web. Now, you've heard of the World Wide Web.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is the Wood Wide Web.
Yeah.
And so the trees have got their roots in the ground. And in the ground are these fungi that have nets, hyphae, little hollow tubes running all through the whole countryside, joining the fungi to each other and the trees to each other.
I love it.
So what will happen is, and this was discovered by a scientist several years ago. So if you type in ABC Dr. Karl Wood Wide Web, you'll find the story. Then chase up the name of the scientist, and she did amazing work, and she's written brilliant articles. And so what she discovered was that if you got two trees and one's overshadowing the other one, the one that's in the sunlight is getting lots of leaves, and the one that's not in the sunlight is beginning to die because it doesn't have enough sunlight on its leaves to make glucose. And what the well-fed tree will do is send it glucose through these fungal hyphae, HYPHE. The
Oh.
trees will feed each other to help each other. Even if they're of a different species, they'll help each other cooperate because they're part of an ecological web where if you've just got a single bunch of trees by themselves of the same species, they don't do as well if they're mixed species. And you've got this rich, complex ecology going. So trees will feed each other.
All right. Now, I know we're running out of time, so let me give you this one. Another one from Dr. Jude. Is there any science that supports deja vu?
Yes. It's because we live 0.3 of a second behind reality that deja vu exists. And deja vu in French literally means I have seen. So you come to a corner, you come to a street, you go in a street, and then a red car comes around the corner, and you think, I knew a red car was going to come around the corner. And you were right, you did know. So the light comes in from the outside world. It lands, it comes in through the two holes at the front on each of your eyeballs, one hole per eyeball, the pupil, and it lands on the retina, and then it gets converted into electricity, and there's a fair amount of processing going on and compression. And already in the retina, there is some time spent compressing the image. And so by the time the image leaves the retina and goes to the back of the skull, where you have the full processing happening, even when it's just leaving the retina, already you can pick the image, the difference between an image where you've got a horizontal bar or a vertical bar, and whether the bar is on a white bar on a black background or vice versa. But that's only a small amount of time. It then goes to the back of the head, where you've got two areas on each side of the skull, roughly the size of a baby's clenched fist or a bit bigger than a golf ball. It's called the visual processing center or the visual cortex, or Brodmann's areas 19, 20, and 21. And they turn this electricity into a full 3D color vision, and it takes 0.3 of a second. So you can prove this. So what you can do is you can put some electrodes on a person's head, and they're just staring at a grey screen. And then suddenly you put up a picture of a red car, and 0.3 of a second later, you get this spike of electricity when they're finally processed it, and they say, oh, I can see it now. But 0.3 of a second is a long time. And an animal that moves very fast, like a dog with big teeth or a snake, can do bad things to you in 0.3 of a second. So along the way from your eye to the back of the head, there's a little emergency system that takes off a low resolution feed and looks for something dangerous, like a killer shark or a killer dinosaur or a killer rabbit. It takes off a low res feed, processes it to see if there's any danger to you, and throws it away. But sometimes it leaks into your consciousness.
Wow.
So you go out into the street, you leave the house, you go out into the street, and you look at both ways, and then you get at 1/10 of a second, you get this low res image that there's a car coming around the corner, and then 0.2 of a second later, at the 0.3 of a second mark, you get this car coming around the corner, because the image that should have been thrown away, remember, there's too much information coming in, gets processed, and you end up with thinking, why am I able to see things in the future? What are tomorrow's lotto numbers? Sorry, they're more than 0.2 of a second into the future.
That's right. Okay. So that is great. I love that. That explains a lot, because I do get that feeling. It's like I feel like I've been here before, and then you get all the the mystic version, but I'm happy to know that there's some science behind it. Okay, lucky last question there, Dr. Carr, also from Dr. Jude. She's been very inquisitive. If we're exporting so many satellites and machinery into space, are we disrupting the balance of materials on our planet? Will it have any adverse effect on our ecosystem? There's a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah. So the answer is, in the short term, definitely not. So the weight of our planet is 6, followed by 24 zeros, kilograms,
Sure.
or 6 followed by 21 zeros, and you call that tons.
All right.
Each year, meteors add about 50,000 tons. That's 5 followed by 4 zeros, which is not very big. They add 50,000 tons of mass, but we're losing 90,000 tons of hydrogen and helium each year. So overall, our planet is losing about 40,000 tons of mass each year. And in a long scale, it's not going to make any difference. Like the time for the Earth to orbit around the sun or to revolve on its own axis has nothing to do with the mass. So the satellites that we're throwing up at the moment won't be a significant change at all. Although I am hoping that we hurry up and become a space-going race so that we can then deflect any asteroids that might try to hit us. But that's another story.
Right. Okay. All right. One more question. We have to ask this question. It has to be asked. Is Elon Musk a supervillain?
He has a remarkable ability to see economic trends and work on them and make them happen, and also to actually make them happen from scratch.
Yeah.
Until Elon Musk, all rockets used for space travel were disposable. Use once, throw away. And he said, well, we can just keep a little bit of extra fuel and use that to help the spacecraft land again. He said, having single-use rockets is as stupid as destroying your aeroplane each time you land at your destination.
Yeah.
The technology was hard, but he had the numbers on his side and he was able to make it work, and he did make it work. So he was good in that way. He's also been good in getting electric vehicles up. But remember, everything has many sides. Like a little bit of food is good, too much is bad. Same with water. So does he have a bad side? I'm sure we all have a bad side. Like sometimes I'm not as kind as I could be. I know. But whenever a bus, when I'm driving, whenever a bus wants to pull out, I can see the blinker. I always slow down and flash my lights 3 times to let them in, because there's only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people in my vehicle, but there's up to 70. So obviously they should have priority. And then you get the thing called the hand, where the bus driver will put their hand out of the window just up to the junction of the fingers and the palm. You don't get the full wrist. No, you don't get a wrist. You just get the fingers and a little bit of the palm. And I just love getting the hand when they just put it out. And sometimes I'll put on the 4-way blinkers to thank me as well. And I'll do that for trucks too. Because,
Okay.
but sometimes I'm not as kind as I could be. So maybe Elon Musk has a dark side as well.
All right. Okay. Well, we're waiting to see it, and maybe it'll come out on Twitter. Dr. Karl, I've got to thank you again, mate. We've taken up way too much of your time. Little Book of Climate Change is the latest effort from Dr. Karl. Absolutely brilliant, mate. Really appreciate talking to you this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Mark, and thank you to the wonderful audience for having such deep and insightful inquiries about the universe around us.
You're brilliant, mate. We're going to get that to air next Friday, and I will put it out on the socials with podcasts and videos and all sorts of stuff. I'll lead that to someone smarter than me, though, but I'll make sure they link you in and you can check it out.
Yeah, and I can retweet them and pin them as
Yes.
well. So I'm at Dr. Karl, DOCTORKRL. Yeah, it is evil what the fossil fuel companies are doing and getting away with.
And getting paid
And-
for. They're not even you're just relying on their own profits. Like they're actually taking money from us while they're doing it in addition to what we're paying them. It's
Well, part of the problem is that in Australia, politicians are so cheap.
yeah.
And if you donate to the re-election fund of any political party, I'm not picking on any one of them, basically your return is 1,000 to 1. You
Yeah.
give them $1, you get $1,000 back. You give them 1,000, you get $1 million. You give them 3,000, you get 3 million back. It's a really good return donating to a political party. And so there is an illegal way to make things better. which is to bribe the politicians with regard to climate change. They're so cheap. It'd be cheaper. But the thing is, the fossil fuel companies would just throw in a few more zeros and win.
Right. You'd be in a bidding war for politicians.
They've got deeper pockets, but Sam Dastyari, the Labor Party politician, he accepted a Chinese bribe for $5,000.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's so cheap. I mean, $5,000. I mean, for the amount of money that those guys are seeing going through their fingertips, 5,000. Anyway, I'm gonna stop.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and it's quite sad, really. It's like,
Well,
if you're going to sell out, mate, sell out for something worth it. That is just
well,
terrible.
I'm glad to see the kids coming through. Like in my case, I've been in several street demonstrations against nuclear weapons to try and get Nelson Mandela out of jail by protesting against the Springboks, to get the Indigenous people of Australia counted on the census, and later in some states of Australia to get them allowed to vote, against the Vietnam War, climate change. Some people now are only now beginning to go into their first demonstration at the age of 30 or 40 or 50. Mate, I started going in street demonstrations when I was about 17.
Yes.
Mate, you got to have the fire in your belly and
This
to
is
try to
true.
make the world a better place. Don't
Well,
break the law.
I think you're certainly on that path, Dr. Carl. Thank you so much this morning, mate. And
Ooh,
look, we'll
this
keep
is my next
rebelling.
thing, whatever it is.
we keep rebelling. We'll keep talking, and we'll try and save the planet, eh?
On 92.7 Mix FM.